I don't know how to set up today's episode. I'm chuckling because I just got off of the interview with Gabriela Embon and enjoyed that conversation in such a deep and meaningful way. Gabriela Embon is a life engineering coach. What does that mean? It means she was a engineer for a decade, a highly functional engineer, now turned sort of supportive coach. And she takes engineering principles to create systematic frameworks to help you build a life of no regrets. How epic is that? But the reason she was on the podcast today is that she works with high-performing MSP owners, and the industry actually sought her out, started bringing her into MSP conferences because leaders in the channel were seeing that there is an epidemic of personal dysregulation and personal limitations that are actually impacting the channel. So we started bringing in the heavy hitters, and that's why she's here today. She's going to talk about work-life integration. She's going to talk about how your relationships, your personal family relationships, are directly impacting, benefiting, or limiting your professional career. It was awesome. This is not just for people in therapy. This is not just for owners. This is for every human being. Let's do it. Gabriela, it's so nice to talk to you again. We had a conversation just a couple of days ago, actually. We were doing a different recording, and now I've got you in the hot seat. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Brian. We had a great conversation.
We did. We both wished we could have kept going, I think. There's something I want to get into with you right away. So you are a life engineering coach, and that is really interesting. I want to start, can you explain to the listener, what does that mean?
Well, from a very literal perspective, it means I'm a certified professional coach, and I'm also an engineer, a chemical engineer with experience. I work in my field for a decade. From a coaching perspective, it means that the way I approach coaching and the way I approach life is very systematic. And I am a framework creator. I create frameworks for people to move from where they are to where they want to be. And I do believe that life has to be engineered. So we need to first start with a vision, make decisions, create an initial path, learn to course correct. So all of the steps that engineers use to build, I put them in practice when it comes to helping individuals create a life of no regrets in their careers and in their relationships.
And the combination of those two things is so interesting to me, and probably one of the reasons that you and I got along so fast right when we met is I didn't go to college, but I enrolled at Oregon State, which is a top 10 engineering school, to be an engineer. And because my favorite subject in school was calculus, it was so much fun to me that I literally bought a whiteboard and made up fake calculus homework in my bedroom and did integral calculus and a little bit of vector calculus. So cool to me to extrapolate and think about math through the lens of like science and physics, you know? One of the things that's immediately coming to mind for me is engineers are sort of fighting against or creating bastions against the law of entropy. You know, that everything is going to just fall into disarray without active intervention.
Exactly.
And I wonder if am I putting too much emphasis on that? Or am I reading too much into the engineering part of the life engineering phrase? Or is there something there? Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
No, you're bringing me back to my thermodynamics 2 course when we studied that, but which is obviously many, many years ago. But I do believe that if you let life happen, right? Let's call it entropy. You create a life of regrets because then life takes over. You create also something that I call an over-the-shelf life. Our goal is to create a life of intention, a life that feels authentic. Authenticity is extremely important to have a healthy self-esteem and to feel that you are not to live in regrets. So a life of intention means that we are constantly clarifying to ourselves what is it that we want, and then we are measuring what we are creating and course correcting to get where we want to, pretty much like a plane to get to where we want to go. A plane has a destination and is constantly course correcting its path to get there. And that's what I call life engineering. So you have an idea. Okay, let's create a pilot. How can you test your idea? And then based on that pilot, is this really the final clarity you were looking for, or was just initial clarity? So all of that, the levels of clarity that I need to move forward. I'll give you an example. Many times people get stuck because they're expecting to have complete certainty and what I call final clarity when they're only in the initial clarity phase. You will only get the level of clarity you're looking for once you walk the path. So how the brain works, how to approach life in a way that will help us move forward, create a life of intention, a fulfilling life. This is what you were referring to, avoiding entropy, basically, avoiding chaos. And this is equally in relationships as it is in career.
Right. And we're going to get into that because this life and career kind of false dichotomy is something that I think you have a lot of insight on. I just want to expound on this initial clarity versus final clarity thing. Are you talking about, like in the plane example, people expect or they want to see the landing runway before they've even taken off?
Exactly.
Okay. Talk a little bit more about that in terms of, I mean, you work with MSPs and you work with MSP leaders, and let's put this into career terms. So when you work with people who are like, hey, I have a goal, and they might be saying like, this is the thing I want to end up at, but they haven't even started. Talk to me a little bit more about the differences between that initial clarity and the final clarity, and maybe what the separation is.
So when we have a goal, right, there are two scenarios. One is we know exactly what we want, but because we don't know how to get there, we don't have the entire staircase figured it out, we don't start. And I believe that waiting for the entire staircase to be revealed is a waste of time. Because once you take the first step, you're going to be changed. You're going to know more. You're going to be a different person. So the next step, the one that you were trying to figure out in the beginning, in the starting point, is no longer going to be relevant. If we look at the MSP world and the AI and cybersecurity, that is changing so fast, that approach can really hold you back. It teaches, I think that the technology world teaches us, because it's advancing so fast, that have a destination so you don't get lost. You don't want to just shoot anywhere, right? Have a destination in mind, but get started, because the clarity you need to continue, the next step is going to be revealed after you take the first one. I believe that overthinking, which is a trap that smart people have, is a coping mechanism for lack of trust or faith. And when I mean faith, I don't mean religious faith, although that's always great. I mean faith in the next step, faith that once you're there, you'll know what to do.
Yeah.
Right? So we can get caught up in that overthinking, and that can give us also a false sense of progress. But that's not progress. Progress is only attaining the doing, because as you do, even if it didn't work the way you wanted, even if the result is not what you were looking for, it taught you so much that will give you clarity moving forward. So one of the traps is the overthinking, thinking I need to have the entire staircase figured it out before I start. And I said, no, you need to start to figure it out. The other big trap that I find holds smart people back is what we call, in psychology, is called outcome bias. In coaching, we call it resulting, and this is coming from the poker world, is judging your decisions based on the outcome. So if the outcome was what I was looking for, it was a good decision. Pay attention what we say. We say, when someone asks you, did that proposition, did it work? Did that idea you had, did it work? And you say, well, I don't know, we'll see. Was that a good idea? I don't know. We'll see how it turns out to be. You don't need to know how it turns out to be to know if it was a good idea. But
Right.
because things are changing so fast, we want to teach ourselves to make decisions in the moment that are based on the right parameters, on the vision of where I'm going, whether they work or not, and not link the result to not judge the decision based on the result.
Because that sounds like it could be coming from a lack of faith or trust or an insecurity if you need validation of the decision and you need a binary validation of the decision based off of something that you were trying to control in the future.
Exactly. Control is the biggest word here because we don't always control the result. There are so many factors in the technology world, in the cyberspace world, that we don't control everything, but we do control the quality of our choices. The result is not in our control.
I need to tell you a story because that theme of control is something that's obviously coming up already in what we're talking about. And I would imagine is probably a dominating factor in most of the people's lives whom you coach, is people who are trying to control everything, Anyway, when I started Feel Good MSP, I had this grandiose concept for basically like rethinking the shape of the org chart rather than it being a pyramid, being concentric circles, so that the leadership's role is to actually create definition for the organization and then protect the organization from the outside. And that then you build inward instead of building down. And it was this idea that I had of, hey, let's make it less hierarchical and less important like what your title is and more about like where you fit into the grander scheme. I had this concept, the business model. Here was the thesis. We make a certain percentage of our revenues, and then a certain percentage of our revenues we invest into upskilling and coaching our team members. And then another percentage of those revenues will go towards investing in those team members' future endeavors and taking an equity stake in them so that I could become like a factory for help turning people into a version of themselves who they could go and pursue their dream. And it sounds really neat, and it would probably make a good Disney movie. But the problem was that it was all fun and games until I realized not everybody wants to do that. They don't want to learn a few skills at a job and then go start their own company in 3 years. I was trying to put people on these paths that they were like, I don't want to go on that path. And so then I was feeling discouraged that it wasn't working, if you will. But in reality, I didn't realize I was trying to completely take control of everyone's future. But I'm like smothering them to death with a pillow instead of trying to comfort them with it, because I was trying to be a resource in a way that nobody was asking me to. And I realized I'm trying to control every single person on my team, what they want, when they want it. But it wasn't my intention. It was just, I tried to build the whole thing before I started, the whole concept where everything was going to go. And if I would have waited 3 months and written that in pencil rather than, in blood, realized this is stupid. This doesn't work at all. And I need to have a completely different set of circumstances for this to work. I still think that model is a noble one and I think would work in the right circumstances. But as you're talking through this, that's the story that comes to mind. I've done that. Who knows how many times I've actually done that, but that's the one that's most recent. How do you feel like this manifests in the people that you coach or the people that you meet in the channel?
I'll give an example of a session I had today at 8 a.m, which is usually way too early for me, but this is what works for that client. So I wake up early and have 2 cups of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I find that one of the things that is lacking in communication, and that will tie into the control that you were talking about, is listening. Listening is the first step of communication. And then when you come from that place of first, let me listen what the people need and want, then it's much easier for me to confidently go and provide what I'm here to provide or what I want to sell. So that will tie into selling as well. So this client was preparing for, this client's an executive in a bank, was preparing for a meeting with the stakeholders. And the person was telling me, I'm not sure if I should answer from a strategic answer or a much more tactical, down to earth, this is what we're doing. And I said, well, you're talking about how you communicate, but you have forgotten the first step, which is listening. So how about you prepare both answers to what you know you're going to be asked, a strategic one and a tactical one. But before you answer, you ask them, what kind of answer you want me to get? Do you want to hear a strategic answer or what, do you want to hear a tactical answer? Listen first, and then you know exactly what to say. And the moment you do that, you already put yourself in a whole different level because they are going to receive what they're looking for rather than asking a question. You know, when you ask a question and you get an answer and you go, this is not what I was looking for. Well, you remove all that. So they're going to be open to what you have to say. I think that control is a coping mechanism to uncertainty. But we don't have to have uncertainty if we just ask, if we are clear, if we are transparent.
I like that. And furthermore, perhaps higher up in the personal journey, you don't have to have a coping mechanism even if you do have uncertainty.
No, that's where trust and faith comes in place.
That's right. I want to talk about those concepts, and then I want to talk about pressure and stress. Business owners are under a lot of pressure, and an amount of pressure that usually has adverse effects on their health. You can see it when you look at a room of MSP owners or business owners. You can see the owners from the engineers, on their faces and their bodies and their skin, and just you can see what it does to them. So stress is a real thing. One of the things that you do so well is you create those frameworks to help anybody under that level of stress protect balance and relationships in their life. And I want to talk to you about this because the entrepreneurial journey is so incredibly lonely. Even with a support system, it's so lonely. There's just certain parts of your life that nobody else is in. They're not in that feeling with you in the same way. But I want to talk about the relationship wear and tear with spouses, children, friends, even colleagues or employees. How do you see that stress impact the average MSP owner? Or frankly, just even, any high performance person, a salesperson has their own tremendous version of stress too, where, hey, if you don't do your job, you won't pay your bills. An engineer gets paid the same amount of money, whether they do a good job or a bad job. A salesperson doesn't. Or sometimes a salesperson does a good job and they lose a sale because of something outside of their control, and they still don't get paid. So talk to me about the way you see that stress manifest. By the way,
doesn't mean that they operated poorly.
That's right.
The connection between outcome and choice and decisions or the way you operate it.
Yeah. Talk about the way that you see that stress manifests on people, and then tell me a little bit about the tools that you give, like what, to help people through protecting those relationships.
I'll start with the first question, how stress manifests in people. Usually it manifests in having a very short bandwidth, emotional bandwidth with other people, whether it's with your colleagues or your employees or at home. So if I come home very stressed, my emotional bandwidth, my capacity to be empathetic and communicate is usually very small. And then what we tend to do, we tend to isolate, which to a certain point can be okay if I need to process it first. But if it becomes the norm, the pattern, then we have an issue, because now when we isolate, obviously with time, we start creating disconnection. Our partners are not with us because we're always happy and everything is perfect. They are with us because we want to share our lives together. And stress and challenges at work is part of life, and they're meant to be shared as well. It's very easy to share when I'm super happy and everything went well and I have only good news, but then you're depriving them from the opportunity to be there for you, which is not only good for you, it's amazing for them, right? So that's how stress impacts the human being. And if we don't find ways to cope with it properly, then it starts impacting, obviously, your health, not just your emotional bandwidth, right? You can manifest physically as well. with your sleep, your digestion, in different ways in your health.
I'm going to ask a silly question, but is feeling chronic stress, is it a maturity gap? Is there some gauntlet of life I can go through that means that I no longer get stressed out by those situations? Or is it that stress is inevitable under high tension situations, but my relationship to cortisol and my relationship to stress changes and I can cope with it better? Like, is stress optional is what I'm asking for an entrepreneur, or is it inevitable?
I think a part of it is inevitable and part of it is optional.
Okay.
You want to fortify your foundation so you can handle life properly. And when I say fortify your foundation, we can look at it in different ways. We can look at it as your lifestyle, the sleep, how much you sleep, the relationships with your home, with your spouse, the culture at home. Home should be a place where you can put yourself together, where you can recharge, where your nervous system feels like I can be myself and not another battlefield. So when you build your home as a charging station, right? Even if you do the dishes, it has nothing to do with that. We're talking about energy, not that you come home and put your feet up and do nothing. That's not what I mean by charging your station. Then obviously that helps you deal with stress. Good, nutrition, exercise, sleep, all of that. Another component of preventing stress is working on yourself, knowing yourself, self-awareness, self-mastery.
Yeah.
That's such a critical aspect of succeeding in business. I think that personal development and business development are so highly correlated. They go hand in hand. You work on yourself, you work on your business. So stress is usually created also because we all have limiting patterns. We all have wounds from the way we grew up. And it has nothing to do with mental health. I'm not saying we have a mental health problem. I'm saying that human beings have wounds and scars.
Yeah.
And the more you work on them, the more immune you become to the triggers of the outside world. And it's funny because this is an analogy that I used to give when I started as a coach, so in 2010. If you have on your foot or your thigh, you have a wound and somebody bumps on you, you're going to scream. But if your muscle is healthy and somebody bumps on you, you're going to say, sorry, you'll say, it's fine. Never mind, it's going to go away. So you don't get to control if somebody bumps on you, but you do get to control if you have a wound there or not. And if you have, it's your responsibility. It might not be your fault because usually the circumstances we experience are not your fault, are not our fault, but they are our responsibility.
Yeah.
So self-mastery is part of you making sure that you have the emotional fortitude, the mental fortitude to deal with life challenges. That is optional.
That's right. Wow. Broadening your capacity for high intensity situations or your capacity for difficulty by healing as a person will have
Resilient.
a direct correlation with your ceiling as an entrepreneur.
Well said.
Yeah. I almost don't want to use this phrase because it invokes a different feeling, but the concept of work and life balance.
Yeah, I don't like I have so much to say about that. Okay.
Right. But in this lens, right, like part of the reason that phrase exists in a way is that people are talking about the separation of work and life. But you say something, I think it's in your book, where you talk about you have one job, you have one home. You might even have two different minds in that way, but you only have one nervous system. Will you talk about that?
Yes. So, well, first of all, like you said, we have one nervous system. So this idea that I can separate work from home and say, no, at home, I don't bring my problems from home to work. At work, I can detach. That's actually an illusion because you have one nervous system. So the way you show up one place is going to affect the way you show up in the other one. And the problem with looking at work-life balance rather than work-life integration is that now you have two competing forces, right? Work and life. And then you're constantly trying to juggle both, and something is going to drop. One of the balls are going to drop. Rather than looking at them as two competing forces, what you want to do is you want to have work-life integration. Look at these two as two parts of one mission. And in practical terms, okay, this is the idea, but in practical terms, what this means is that you, first of all, know how to transition from work into home, and we can talk about it if you like. What's the protocol that we can apply to transition properly and avoid contaminating our home with the stress from work?
Yeah.
And the other one is bring your spouse into your life. Now, I'm not saying you have to tell them all the details of each incident you had at work with every client, but share with them. And I want to give you an example from last night. This is so fun that I can give you live examples. I saw that my husband came from work this week, more tired than usual. And we text each other once in a day, how's your day going? And yesterday he says, how's your day going? I said, it's going good. I had a great conversation with Brian. That was the day before. And I said, what about you? And he said, it's a challenging week. And I didn't know that. So towards the end of the day, I texted him and I said, day night, we go for supper tonight? And he said, yes, please. I said, yay. I texted back, yay, because I text like a man. I don't text long messages.
Okay. Love it.
He's at work. So what I'm going to now...
Yeah.
So then we went out and I said, okay, what's going on? And he told me what was going on. And he gave me an analogy. He said, when you have the firefighter's hose with water, this is what, it's not the garden hose, it's the firefight. And I'm trying to drink all the water and I'm swamped. I said, okay, let's talk. What's going on? Share with me. So I wore my listener hat. I wore my most sweet and empathetic hat. And that's what it means, work-life integration. Rather than me saying, why are you distant? Why are you nervous? Why are you tired? You're dropping the ball. What's going on? If I know what's going on, you're giving me the opportunity to be your friend. And friendship is the second pillar described in my book. It's called the U pillar. The U pillar is, can I help you in your self-mastery? Meaning, can I be respectful, empathetic, generous? Can I be a friend? But if I don't know what's going on with you, I cannot be your friend. I cannot be empathetic. So you are not only depriving yourself from receiving the support, you are also not allowing me to be that for you, depriving me. And then the culture that gets created at home,
Now it's a recharging station. Now it's like, and you're more, the stress creates opportunity for connection rather than stress creating one more millimeter of distance between you and everyone else.
I like the way you put that. I like that because this is what life is all about.
Yeah.
Right? Being there together in the ups and the downs. And when people say ups and downs, what do they usually think? In sickness and health, which obviously you also want to be there. But it's not just sickness and health. It's also the day-to-day, the good days and the stressful days.
Yeah.
Bring your partner into your life.
Yeah, that's right.
That's integration. It's not divide your hours. It's bring your partner into your life and also the way you transition from work into the home.
You mentioned you have a protocol or some examples of protocol. I think we should talk about it a little bit. For the listener driving right now and your forehead is tense and your tongue is pressed to the top of your mouth because you're carrying stress in your body. No problem. First of all, just right now, if you're listening, drop the tongue from the roof of your mouth. Relax your ears, let your ears lower. Drop your shoulders half an inch. Just a quick reminder that you're carrying stress in your body, and that's okay. It's not because you're doing something wrong. But you've got an endocrine system, you've got an adrenal system, you have a nervous system that is complicated and that doesn't turn on a dime. It's not designed for that. Gabriela, what are some of the tactics? What are the protocols for somebody who's driving home stressed out of their freaking mind, going, maybe I should just go and have a beer and blow off steam for an hour so that I don't like stress out my wife or yell at my kids, but I'm supposed to be there and there's a list of stuff on the fridge that I got to get done as soon as I get home. How do you help somebody transition their nervous system over?
Yeah. I love this question. And one of the things that I love that you said is your nervous system doesn't shift in a dime. So let's talk about that. Preferably, it starts before you leave work. I actually lectured about this a month ago in an MSP conference. The first thing you want to do is do a brain dump before you leave. Put on paper or whatever you write your stuff in your computer, everything that needs to be done that is right now in your mind. Because if you don't do a brain dump and it stays in your mental shelf, it's going to continuously take space and your energy. And men have a harder time than women to multitask. So if this is operating there, it's going to be harder for you to multitask and be there for other things.
Yeah.
So understand yourself, and you can say new chat when you go home.
Yeah.
Like literally, sometimes when I talk to my husband, I'm talking about and I want to change topics. And I know because this is the way the brain works for men, it's not as easy for them to follow me. So I said, new chat now.
Uh-huh.
Like I'm talking to ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly. Or, hey, I'm going to close all the tabs, open a new window.
Exactly.
I've heard it said that men are like waffles and women are spaghetti, where you have syrup that separates all of it, but there's these compartments with these sort of meshy, semi-permeable walls between them on a waffle. In a plate of spaghetti bolognese, every noodle touches every other noodle.
Yes, our brain is more systemic than linear. Yes.
Yeah, right. That's a biological fact.
Oh,
and how many men listening right now are going, you don't understand how good I am at multitasking. Okay, this is not a put down of the way your brain works. This is an explanation that your brain actually is hardwired a little bit differently. And that's fine.
The brain, the nervous system, they all operate so differently. And that's why the way we communicate, we can talk about that too. I'm extremely passionate, but let me answer your question first. And then if you like, we can shed some light into communication, how to improve communication. So do a brain dump. That's the first step. So when you leave your work, you have everything there. You're not going to forget because it's waiting for you when you come back the next day. Then on your way home, that's when you want to decompress or start relaxing or regulating your nervous system. And you want to do this the best way that you know how to. And it changes. It's so individual. So some people like to listen to music. Other likes to listen to a podcast that inspires them, or just being quiet, or listen to meditative words. Whatever works for you, put it there for you to regulate your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And then before you step out of the car and you step into your home, decide who you want to be when you get home. What version of you want to be there? Because you could bring the stress from work into the home. Creating a life of no regrets is not just about the big decisions we look years back. It's on a daily basis. If you bring the stress from work into your home, you're going to regret it hours later when you go to sleep, right? So be intentional. That's the antidote to a life of no regrets. Be intentional. It might not work, but do your best. That's what's important. And then step into the door. And the first thing you want to do is connection. Meaning, before you get into the chaos of what needs to be done, look at your spouse in the eye, give them a hug and say, how are you? Connection will nourish you, that hug. Now, let's say there's so much going on. You have so much stress. So start with connection and communication. Tell your spouse, give me half an hour. All I need to do is shower and decompress, and then I'm with you.
Yeah.
But when you say, I need half an hour to shower and decompress, and then I'm with you, you just communicate it so you can collaborate. So it's not that you have to ignore your feelings or you have to become someone else. But if you find that even all this transition didn't help you, communicate that. Your spouse will understand. Half an hour and then they're with me. So that's the protocol. Before you leave, as you move transition, decide how you want to be when you get home. And if you need, express what you need.
Yeah. I'm really passionate about the topic of communication as well. And I find that like couples who argue, it's almost always because they have a breakdown in communication style. And like my wife and I have never yelled at my wife. It's not because I'm a perfectly patient man. It's because I'm a very good communicator. And I know that if I screamed at my wife, she will not hear me. And I have a paralyzing problem where I really don't like being unheard. It's hard for me. I talked about this in an episode we just recorded. Where was I? Was this podcast or a different one? But I'm the youngest of 5, 7 people all talking at the same time and nobody listening to each other. That it's not because we don't love each other, it's because we did not have the skills to listen in my family. Just don't have that skill. 2 neurodivergent parents. My dad worked like a dog. And the amount of times I'd be in the middle of a story at the dinner table and my dad would go, you know what I saw today? He'd interrupt my story and I'm the only one talking. Everybody's listening or pretending to listen but my dad. And my mom would go, Ron, Brian was telling a story. He goes, oh, okay, sorry, finish up. And then you're sitting there going, wow, nobody wants to hear this at all. You feel so stupid. So I have this ingrained, like, I'm going to get so good at communicating that people will listen to me. You know, that was such a formative part of my career path. But if you were to go home and say, give me a half hour to your spouse, you didn't communicate what you needed or why you needed it or what the objective was of the 30 minutes. And I find that if you can relay 2 things, your motive and your goal, then people are so much more likely to be on your team. If you say, I like to be able to unwind and be with you, and so I need 30 minutes to just get kind of let some of these feelings out that are stuck in me because I had a really difficult day, and I'm happy to talk to you about it later. I said, my goal is I want to be with you. My motive, what I need is 30 minutes, and the motive behind it is to get these feelings out of my body. Now they go, I understand that. And I'm more likely to extend compassion and patience and allowance for that need. But if I say, give me half hour, and she goes, I haven't had a half hour all day. These kids are yours, and the trash needs to be out, and you didn't do. And all of a sudden, now their needs aren't being met, and they feel like, well, I don't even have an opportunity to whatever. So
that's
go ahead.
Well. You said it beautifully. That's the right way to go about it. That doesn't take more time because when I talk about one of the pushbacks that I get when I talk about properly connection, how to connect properly, people say, I don't have time. That doesn't require time. It requires intention.
That's right. That's right. It's a little bit more forethought, but in reality, it's like putting on your seatbelt when you start your car. Does it take time? Technically, maybe, but is it slowing you down? No, because it's wired into your kickstart program. You sit into your car and you go, push the button, do the thing, check the thing, check the thing. You didn't even notice you did it because you're conditioned. You're like, well, this is a part of me starting my car. A part of coming in the door is creating a moment of connection with your spouse. But I do want to ask you, and maybe we're getting too technical here, but what advice do you give to the person who goes, yeah, but 30 minutes is an unreasonable ask. I have 3 under 3 and my spouse is something blah, blah, blah. And we're paycheck to paycheck and the stress level is high and that whatever. I can't have 30 minutes to go draw a bath and journal. I have to be on the second I walk in. What do you tell those people who they need the decompression time, but they don't have it?
Then I would say, leave work half an hour earlier. Go arrive home, go for a walk around the block, decompress, and then do it. But I will still challenge if really this half hour is not an option. Because what I believe is that for the most part, it feels like it's not an option because the way you've been operating is arriving home with the stress, and then everything becomes so chaotic that it feels that you are in survival mode. But what if you actually take the half hour not to be in survival mode? I would say put it to the test, an experiment. You might see that even though you have half hour less, things are so much smoother and easier just because you took that half hour.
I love that.
You might even prompt I love the word prompt. And I know it's a technical word, but prompt your spouse. Call them on the way, say, "Hi, honey, how's your day? How you doing? I know you are probably are handling everything on your own and you're stressed, and I get you. I just want to let you know that I had a very stressful day. So when I come home, would it be possible for me to take half an hour to decompress? Because like you said, I want to be there for you and give you some time to breathe. So I would need this half an hour, but then I'm all yours." So prompt them earlier before you get home. It's all in the communication. If you prompt them, then you're very likely to have collaboration.
Right. And they will see the result.
Exactly. That's why I say put it to the test. You'll see it yourself. You'll realize that extra half hour made a huge difference. Even though you think it's less time, it actually benefited and created a whole different dynamic in the home.
Right.
And the spouse will feel, respected and seen.
Yeah. And by the way, I've never heard a piece of relationship advice that didn't also apply to across other relationships. Like, this all applies with building your team. If you're dysregulated at work, it's going to impact your work culture. If you're running a business and you're stressed out of your mind and you're not letting yourself regulate and all of that, I could see it having negative impacts on your team culture, which then can affect performance, which then creates a higher degree of stress. And that's how we see companies flatline when we meet the internal limitations of the leader and their ability to cope with stress.
100%. I've seen it with my clients. Projects get delayed because of stress, politics, survival mode, lack of clarity and communication. We create chaos rather than simplicity. And imagine this, if you come to work stressed and unregulated or fragmented, as I say, your emotional bandwidth is also very small. So you're less likely to empower your team. You're less likely to let them to say, you know what? Why don't you try? And then we see let them try, let them fail as part of the learning process. You're going to be controlling, you're going to be micromanaging because you are in fear mode. You are in stress mode. You are in survival mode. And then you actually grow a team that depends on you rather than feeling empowered and feeling like, no, my manager allows me to try and to learn and to fail as part of the learning process. So it impacts so many aspects. When you're stressed, you will disempower your team.
Yeah. Somebody might be listening to this podcast going, yeah, I'm stressed all the time. And I have an intellectual understanding that this problem applies to me. But it can sometimes feel unhelpful at best and condescending at worst to hear people just say, be less stressed out. Well, that actually doesn't help at all. And actually, it exacerbates the problem. Yeah. So obviously, that's not what we're saying. You've got an entire book full of tactical resources on the why behind this and all of that. And I will link that in the show notes for this because a lot of people need to read it. And now what's interesting to me is that the managed service industry sought you out and is now you're getting pulled into conferences because the leaders in our industry see this. It's kind of an epidemic, actually. Stress and imbalance and the fragmented self is sort of plaguing, well, probably most entrepreneurs. But I think in many ways, it is actually a culprit. Internal limitations is a huge culprit to the external limitations in the average business. But if somebody's listening to this, Gabriela, and they're like, okay, but I don't have the respect of a spouse, or I don't have a spouse. I'm stressed out of my mind all the time. The expectations of me are only going to get higher. I'm clocking long, long, long days to get this stuff done. What do you tell somebody who's coming to you kind of at the end of their rope when they might not yet have faith for a better future?
So the antidote to stress or, chronic stress, in my opinion, is beyond the lifestyle, which is extremely important. So I would say if you live alone and you are so stressed, take care of your lifestyle, even if you don't live alone, okay? So sleep, eat, move, breathe, get out, get sunlight. Okay, you live in LA, so that's not an issue. Here, it could be an issue sometimes. You don't live alone. You have a family, 3 under 3, and you're asking me to take care of sleep, right? That feels like an impossible task. That's where I would say connection is so important. Connection is the antidote to stress. Even if you're single, connection to your family, connection to your friends. Connection is the antidote. I will give you an example of that. And connection means prioritize connection with the people that are your support system. I talk about the 4 pillars in the book, and there are what we call connection rituals. But connection rituals, they regulate your nervous system. At work, say thank you and please. You instantly shift the energy around you. I give you an example of connection and how connection regulates your nervous system. First of all, before you leave your home, give a hug to your partner and say, I'm leaving. Greet each other when you come home with a hug. So, transition in the morning to work and from work should happen with connection first. When anybody in my home, whether it's my spouse or my children, leave the home, I actually go to the door because I work from home. So I go to the door to say goodbye and give them a hug. Mm-hmm. I never yell from the kitchen, bye, have a good day. Never, ever. Mm. I will make it a point to go to the door. And when I hear somebody come in the home, unless I'm in a session, I will walk to the door and greet them. Mm. Okay, that's connection, and that regulates the nervous system. But I'm going to give you another example that I gave in one of the talks of how connection helps you regulate your nervous system. If you and your partner are a team and you are working together by practicing the 4 pillars described in the book, then you will know what makes your partner tick, what makes them happy, what makes them feel good. So in my home, food is a big one, okay? And we all cook. Luckily, it's not all on me, but I'm the one preparing the lunch boxes. So the days my husband goes to work, to the office, I make his lunchbox. And I make it a point to put there what I know he likes, not just the main meal, the fruits, the snacks, the yogurt, whatever he likes. Does he need me to do that? Absolutely not. He can do it himself. He's the great cook also. Does he need to bring lunch from work? Well, he could also buy. He works downtown Montreal. But why do I do that? He's a grown man. Why do I do that? Because the point is what happens at noon in the middle of the working day when he opens that lunchbox. He might be going through a stressful day from meeting to meeting, and then he opens the lunchbox. And the message his nervous system receives is, I'm seen, I'm cared for, somebody has my back.
Yeah.
Somebody knows me. So instantly, that will regulate his nervous system, and the way he shows up for the other half of the day is completely different.
Yeah.
So when you're stressed, rather than trying to get rid of the circumstances that are creating the stress and putting on fires, prioritize connection with yourself by going for walks, by sleeping well, and if that's not a possibility, with the people who support you.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Connection is something anybody can do. It actually, the only real cost is vulnerability. That's all it costs you. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't cost you any money. It doesn't really cost you any time. No. And I was thinking as you were talking, going, I wonder if this applies to differently to introverts and extroverts, because sometimes introverts in our industry, sometimes a lot of people in our industry claim to not really like people and that people create stress for them. But I don't think we are biologically, anthropologically wired to thrive. We are emotionally and hormonally regulated by being around other human beings. That's why we all cluster together.
Even if you are introverted, even more so. First of all, when you're introverted, you're more likely to charge yourself when you are with one person, when you have more intimate relationships.
Yeah.
And especially if you're introverted, that when you are with a lot of people at work, that drains your battery when you come home, right?
Yeah. I like to think in this framework of constructive versus destructive regulation, because I have a pattern historically of destructive regulation, meaning things that are bad for me that will give me dopamine, and that's where addiction comes in. That's where distraction, that's where doom scrolling comes in. Doom scrolling is a destructive regulator. It might actually make you feel more balanced. In reality, it's an intravenous shot of dopamine, of unfiltered raw dopamine, faster than your brain is supposed to get it. It's like, I drank too much alcohol, so now I'm going to drink a whole bunch of espresso because I'm too sleepy, and now I'm too sleepy, so I'll drink more alcohol. Like, that's not really regulating. That's just kind of like pulling yourself in two bad directions at once. But there are the constructive regulators where you are actually doing yourself a favor, and you're going to be better off having done that. And for me, one of my personal regulators is playing music. A lot of people might not know that was like basically my entire life. I was going to be a professional musician, and I was a drummer in a bunch of groups, and I played all the way through college. And that was one of the reasons I moved to Los Angeles, was to pursue music. And I play a bunch of instruments. But now it's something I do. It's almost like a journal. Like, I'll write a song, and I don't really care if anybody ever hears it, because it's something I do for myself. But I remember when I was going through one of the hardest season of my life, for sure, by an order of magnitude, when my wife and I lost all of our belongings, and my wife got really sick to black mold. Oh. And we ended up having to live in our friend's basement for 7 months while I was trying to build the business. And we were at their house, and it's this family we live with, and Dan, the dad, he got out his ukulele, and he had it on the table. I picked it up and just started strumming the ukulele. And then Christina, the woman who we were staying with, she looked at me, she went, "Oh, you're back." And within like 60 seconds of playing a ukulele, I was back in my body again. She was like, "Oh, I feel like I haven't actually seen you all day because you've been somewhere else in your mind." And I was back from just strumming plunking on a ukulele. And so now I have a music room. I have a drum set in there and a keyboard in there and my ukulele in there. And 5 minutes on the drums, not just to hit something, but to play something. I'm an Enneagram 8, if you're an Enneagram person, which is a body intelligence, right? Like, I kind of live in my physical body a little bit. So that's something for me that helps regulate me. Or like a dinner party with 6 people, because I'm an extrovert, where you can listen to a bunch of things at once, and it's stimulus that keeps my ADHD brain locked in. But conversation one-on-one, sometimes it's actually really hard for my brain to listen to stay in one conversation for a long time. And that's okay. It's not because I don't care. It's just because my brain isn't made for that. But those are my methods. And I want to just challenge the listener. I know we need to, unfortunately, end the interview in just a minute, but I want to challenge the listener that you might be hearing, Gabriela, and it sounds Herculean when you think about like engineering my life back into order when it is out of order. It is out of control. But actually, and I'm sure you would agree, Gabriela, that this series of small intentional decisions.
The butterfly effect.
Right. Talk about that, because I'm sure that that's the objection that you get oftentimes when people go, "My wife barely even talks to me anymore," or I'm not married anymore. And my business is, I work 20 hours a day and my business is barely afloat, and I'm losing the fight to entropy. My life is falling into pieces. Not to be too dramatic here, but I'm sure you have those conversations actually. And you see that you meet those people and they might not always be that open about it, but what is the what is the word of encouragement you would give a listener right now who's in front of you, who you can see they're crestfallen and they love the idea of this, but it almost puts a sour taste in their mouth because it feels like what they want is impossible to achieve, of a life with no regret?
So I'll refer back to the butterfly effect, which in simple words means that a tiny tweak can make over time a big difference. And that's what we're looking for. Life is not rerouted or course corrected drastically. Even the plane is tiny course corrections. So I'll give you an example that I gave in the last conference with the MSPs last month. I was doing a mastermind. I was sitting with this gentleman and he said exactly what she said. My wife and I can barely talk. Every talk becomes a source of conflict. And I said, so don't talk. Let's not start with communication. Usually people start with communication. The way to start is always connection. If you don't have connection, you cannot communicate. You will communicate as enemies, so don't communicate. Said, how about you send her a text message in the middle of the day? I said, do you text your wife in the middle of the day? She says, only if I need something from her. I said, okay, let's change that. How about you text her, how's your day going? That's it. He said, but I don't have time. There's so much going on in my day. I'm in survival mode. I said, I get that. So put a reminder. Put an alarm on your phone every day at 11:30 at noon that says, text my wife. And all you do that. Within a week, you're going to start seeing that when you come home, there are more smiles, more softness. So don't overwhelm yourself with big steps, tiny steps. What can you do that you would do to start building connection?
Incredible. Gabriela, I think more people just need to hear you. I mean that. I think more people need to benefit from the work that you have done. Because by the way, you weren't born with all of the tools you have. You weren't born with all the space you have inside of you for other people. You created that space by doing your work. And there's so much, we could almost do an episode 2 of this podcast. We joked about that the other day. We need to do an episode 2 on your podcast. I have a feeling you and I are going to be long friends because we haven't even talked about the spiritual component of this, not faith or religion, but spiritual, the metaphysical part of being a human being. We haven't even gotten into how high performers, some of the tactical ways that high performers can integrate these things into their business. There's so much more that we could pursue. And we haven't gotten to hear your whole story, but your story is out there. And so if people want to learn more about you, and if they're interested in the topic of having their life engineered, whether it's by hiring somebody like you or just learning from the experience you have, where can people go to learn more about you? And do you have any resources that you recommend?
Yes, absolutely. So they can go to my website, Gabriela with one L on embon.com. And I think there's a freebie there, is a connection guide they can download. And they can also purchase my book. It's $18 on Amazon, at least in the Canadian Amazon is 18. And it teaches you the 4 pillars to create a legendary relationship. And just to name them, the me, the you, the our, the us. And it's written from the lens of an engineer. It brings the parallel from engineering to coaching. So you can see that what you already do at work, how to apply that at home.
Well, you made one sale today because I'm buying your book as soon as we hang up. Thank you so much, Gabriela, for being here. Sincerely, we'll put all that stuff in the show notes. And if you're listening, I want more of this type of episode on the podcast because this is the work that separates, to bring it back to the business side, the sales side. This is actually the work that creates legendary salespeople. I truly believe that. The best sales training I ever got was 3 years of therapy. And I'm not asking you, listener, to go into therapy, but what I am saying is you have personal limitations inside of you, and they are affecting your ability to perform at work. And by addressing those limitations with small, manageable steps, you become bigger on the inside than you are on the outside. That is one of the magical things about being a person. And the more space you have on the inside, the more capacity you have for success, for happiness, for connection, ultimately for performance. So Gabriela, thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you, Brian, for creating this type of conversation. This is so refreshing, this space, these conversations. And, you know, when I was introduced to you, somebody told me, you have to meet Brian. They knew where they were talking. I sent a thank you email saying, oh my God, how did you know? So I love our synergy. I love what you're doing with people, with the MSP owners. I think they are under, like you said, so much stress because things are changing so fast. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you for saying what needs to be said, because not everybody has the courage to do that.
Well, maybe we'll do more of this stuff together, and we'll kind of keep creating these moments for the listeners.
Yeah.
Thanks again. We'll see you again soon.